Hello, my name is Jonathan Clark. I've got another short tutorial video here relating to Ableton, also relating to warping. I did that, the entire how to warp tracks in Ableton video a couple years ago, and it's had quite a few views. And so I wanted to do a very short video this afternoon to kind of just use 3 or 4 tracks as examples of things that aren't quite as straightforward to warp as most dance music is. Now I'm not going to get into very difficult stuff like some rock music. Trying to warp acapellas can be kind of difficult. I'll save that for an advanced warping video at some point. But this intermediate one should help you with maybe 5% of the electronic music tracks you'll run across that have a little minor hiccups when you're trying to warp them. So let's take a look at what we have. The tracks I'm going to look at today: Chromie by Analogics, the original mix; Saxo by Betula featuring Maya, I don't even know how to pronounce that; Indigo by Francisco Alendes and Paolo Poletto; and Hey Lady Luck by Michael Cleese; and Just Breathe by Nicole Graham, Harley and Muscle. Okay, so 5 tracks that we'll take a quick look at. Let's open up Ableton Live, and yeah, so basically one of these is very simple. It's just that when Ableton tries to auto warp things, sometimes it starts in the wrong place. So that first one will be a very quick one to go over. The second and third, a little bit trickier. Well, we'll see. We'll see as soon as they're in. So while these are just creating the waveform view, what else can I tell you? I guess if you like these videos, please share them. That would be a huge favor to me. If you think that they'd be worthwhile for your friends, share them on social media. If you want to follow me, it's on Twitter. It's DJ Bolivia. Okay, here we go. So we've got 5 tracks in here, and none of them are warped yet. And you can see right now it says drop audio effects here down in this lower pane. That means we're not in waveform view, we're in the other view. So hit your shift tab to bring up waveform view. And let's start with the Betula song. So when you zoom in, and I'm going to presume you've already watched my basic warping in Ableton video. So if you zoom in here, what's going on here? The first warp marker occurs quite a bit before the music. So if I zoom back out, let's go up to a point further in the music where we have an obvious downbeat here, which you can tell by the thickness of the waveform view. So I'm going to turn on the metronome. Okay. Okay, well that seems very simple. It looks like right there should be the downbeat on a bar. Now let's go back here and remember that we've got we've got about an 1/8 note of space before the beat starts. Now if you aren't familiar with music notation, music theory, and don't know 1/8 notes and 16th notes, let's not worry about that too much right now. But if you do understand, think about it this way. That's bar 2, that's bar 1, so the 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 are quarter notes, and that means halfway between them shows 1/8 notes, and if you've got a quarter note divided into 4 separate grid partitions, that means we're looking at 16th notes. So we are 2 16th notes away from the orientation you might expect. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to double click there, create a warp marker, because we know that's the downbeat of a bar simply by listening to it. And sometimes it's better to take the metronome off just to be sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2. Okay, so that seems to make sense. Now the problem is, if that's the downbeat of a bar, that should be on a round number, an integer, one of the beginnings of the bars. So what we'll do is we'll slide that back. But if you're sliding stuff around, remember that everything to the right just moves left and right if there are no more warp markers to the right of the one that you're working with. If there are warp markers to the right, then as you slide left and right, the audio between what you're working on and the next warp marker to the right is going to expand and compress. Okay? So basically, by moving this warp marker left, because there was another warp marker over here, this entire section of audio has been compressed. So, if we were to start playing around bar 13, everything's good. But the problem is, by doing this, we've compressed the video to the left, so all this stuff is not in time. Okay? So since we moved the warp marker here by the equivalent of an eighth note, what we're going to have to do here is put a warp marker at the beginning of this stuff, and we will double click to erase that one, and we will do the same thing where we move this warp marker the equivalent of 2/16 notes to the left. Okay? So this was very, very simple. If we play this, yeah, if we play this, we can see that this file was very easy to fix, and it was just simply a case of Ableton trying to put the first warp marker in the wrong place, and everything from that point on was warped at the correct speed in relation to the beginning. It just started at the wrong place. Okay, so that was really simple. Let's get that up out of there. Now, let's go on to a slightly more difficult one. We'll go with the Analogics one next. We'll zoom in, and with this one, it looks like, it looks like Ableton has tried to put the warp marker, the first warp marker, at the start of the waveform. You can kind of see these little dots here, that's where the song actually is starting. But, what's going on? Well, let's move over to here, to where it looks like it's getting thicker. We'll turn the metronome off so we've got a better sense of what's going on, and see if we can figure out where a downbeat should be. Okay, it looks like right there. Okay, that makes sense. So, again, we will double click there because we know that's the beginning of a bar, and if we are zoomed out, let's go with this kind of a zoom level. So again, we have 4/16 notes of zoom between two hits. So I'm going to move this 2 spots to the left, and that means that my other warp marker over here needs to move 2 spots to the left. Now, can I do that? Yes, actually I can. The last file, what I did was I created a warp marker here, and I moved it to that spot. But this time I'm going to go this way. And I'm going to zoom in a bit because that's not quite in the right spot, so we'll fix that. And we can take this off now because it's not relevant. So knowing that this warp marker came on the downbeat at the beginning of a bar, and knowing that we shifted it by a certain amount and then shifted this one by the same amount, this should be the beginning of a bar. So let's try. We'll turn the metronome on. Okay, that sounds good. Now, I know from experience that if I were to right-click and go warp from here straight and go through and try and warp the rest of this file, this is actually, it's all going to work out just fine. Okay, so it would be simple. Now, there's one thing that we have to look at with this one, though. In this case, because the downbeat of a bar did not fall on the first beat in the music, when we try to hit play here, we're not getting those first two 16th notes that we wanted to hear, or we might want to hear. So how do you do that? Well, the simple thing is we'll move everything over to the right by a full bar. Okay, so that means every warp marker in the music has to go one bar to the right. Now luckily we only have 2 warp markers set up so far, so let's try that. This one's going to go from 1 to 2, and in doing that I compressed all this audio, so as you can hear it sounds terrible, but I do the same thing with this warp marker, move it 1 to the right. Okay, that sounds good. So now if we zoom in, our first bar is way over here, and if we were to start playing the song from the beginning, it's going to start here, and so the first downbeat that occurs on a beginning of a bar actually happens on the second bar instead of the first. But you are going to hear these two 16th notes at the end. Okay, so if you're DJing and you wanted this to play, if you're thinking about counting 8-bar sections and you want the 8-bar section to begin here, because that is logically what has happened in this case. See, from 2 to 10 is an 8-bar piece. So if you're trying to make this, if you want to make it easy, what you could do is set it so that 1-1 is here, okay? And so when you bring it in by pressing play, it's going to start, it's going to start at the beginning of that 8-bar section. But if you want to hear these ones, then what you're going to do is you're going to, see, now I can't do it anymore. So I hit Control-Z for undo. What you're going to do is leave it this way, so your first bar is here, and as you're waiting to start this, all you do is press play on this a bar earlier than you normally would, so that you'll hear these 2 16th notes, and then bang, this downbeat happens when you want it to. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's say that's it for analogics. Now let's look at this Michael Cleese song, Hey Lady Luck. Okay, so what's going on here? That one looks pretty straightforward. Let's try playing it. Okay, and it looks like once we get to bar 17, that's when the music's going to get stronger. So this should be pretty straightforward. Okay, that doesn't sound quite right to me. Oh, that's odd. Let's play this once more. See, that, to me, sounds like that should be where the downbeat is. Okay, so if that's the case, what we're going to do is we are going to move it 2 16th notes to the left, and again, because we've done that, we have to go to this one. We'll get to the same zoom level, and we have to move this one 2 16th notes to the left. Odd. Okay, so if that's the case, let's see what happens when we press play this time. I'll just skip ahead. Oh, was that correct? Yes, that was correct. Okay, so same deal here. We have this, we may want to play that introductory beat. And can we do that? Well, the only way to do that really is to move this left. And by doing so, we've stretched, oh sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Let's zoom in. Totally backwards. Okay, so we are zooming out a little. We are 2/16 notes before the end of the bar. So let's move this 2/16 notes before the end of the second bar. Because we went a bar to the right, we are going to have to move this warp marker a bar to the right. And if we had already put other warp markers in the rest of the song, we'd also have to move those one bar to the right. But what's going to happen now? We're going to press play and see what happens. We're going to turn the metronome on. Okay, and so that's all good. And that will, again, I know that the rest of this song is actually going to work out well, but if you want to be sure. See, it looked very deceiving at this point at 85. But when you zoom into bar 86, you can see that it's good. Now it's off a tiny bit, so I'll correct that. Okay. Yeah, so that one was very similar to the previous example. Now let's look at this Francesco Alennis track. Okay, that looks good so far. The first beat is on the first, or the first warp markers on the first downbeat. Although, having said that, just keep this in the back of your mind so you can see a little bit of noise there. Anyway. So if we were to play this, yeah, that sounds good. But watch what happens once we get up here a little further. Yeah, it sounds like offbeats there. If we were to play this with no metronome, sounds like this is the beginning of a bar. Okay, and because of that, I'm going to move that over to a bar and get down to the same zoom level. And because I moved that one over there, over by a couple 16th notes, I'm going to do the same thing here. And let's see if that... Now see how we still have some noise to the left of our start place? It's hard to say whether or not I did the right thing there. Let's double check. And let's put the metronome on too. Yeah, see, I was not zoomed to the right level. That needed to be right there. Oh, that was 2/8 notes perhaps. Okay, that's why. Okay, that sounds right. So, in this case, it kind of seems odd not to have your warp markers right on the beginning of a bar. So, you've got to remember that your warp marker doesn't have to match the beginning of a bar. The warp marker can go anywhere on an audio file, and as long as it's moved to the correct matching position on the timeline, I guess you would say, then that's all that matters. Don't be too focused on thinking you have to have them at the beginning of a bar. Obviously, it's very, very convenient to leave them at the beginning of a bar, and that works best mentally, and it works properly in 99% of electronic music, but you can see here I've got this one, the warping is working, and that's not at the beginning of a bar. Now I might think that should be like that. I might want to zoom into a couple others and move them around a little bit, but that doesn't matter. Now what happens if you did, for some reason, want to put a warp marker there? Huh, you can't. You cannot put a warp marker before there is audio. That's the problem in this case. Okay, so you would think because there's a 1 there, then surely you must be able to put a warp marker there. But if you were actually to look at this audio file in an audio editor, for some reason the beginning of the audio data is right there. And so if I move up here without clicking, I can see that grayed out warp marker, so that means that it's possible to put one there. If I start moving to the left, there's nothing there. That's because there is no audio data underneath, and it's not till you get to there. That's actually the beginning of the WAV file. So there's no such thing as putting a warp marker there. Nothing you can do makes that possible. But it doesn't matter. Okay, so that one's working. Now let's go to the perhaps trickiest one. Now this one, because I have auto warp turned on in my preferences, options, preferences, warp, auto warp long samples turned on, it's tried to warp this. So I've got all these warp markers in here. So the very first thing I'm going to do is, because I don't like all those warp markers, I'm going to right click on the first one, say warp from here straight, and it gets rid of them all. Now, let's see what happens when we press play.
Lunare Project. Vi faremo sentire le stelle.
Now, first of all, that's really annoying to have a promo thing at the beginning of
Lunare
your track.
Project. Vi faremo sentire le stelle.
Bad idea. Okay, this is a little tricky because there's no obvious beats that you can work with. Okay, well, so what are we going to do? Well, let's look for the start of the very obvious beats. Maybe right there. Okay, I didn't need to put a warp marker there, but let's play and see what happens. Yeah, that seems right. So if that's the beginning of a bar, what we'll do is we will slide that over there, and then we can get rid of this one because we have, you always have to have one warp marker in a file if warp is turned on. So if I had not put this one here first, I would not be able to erase that one. Now I'm going to Control Z and undo and just focus on something here for a second. I'm going to double click on this to erase it again, and watch what happens. Basically, this stuff is going to move to the left a little bit. And when we originally had that one only and put this marker in, it was over here. So when I moved that to the left, to the 27 mark, that had the effect of compressing everything in this whole section. And so when I take the warp marker off, there was no longer any compression of that audio being applied by Ableton, because there's no rigid warp marker to lock that in place. So what's going to happen is that's going to spring out a little bit to the left and go back to its original speed. See? Okay, so if this is at 27, and if this is actually warped at the correct speed, which we should double check, pretty close, it's a little off. Okay, so if that stuff's at the right speed, then let's look back at the even bars 25. See, it looks like there's actually a bit of a synth starting there. 21, there's a bit of a synth starting there. Let's go way back. And at bar 3, that's basically where it sounds like the music is starting. Okay, so let's say that's the beginning of the real music, right about there, and we will put that there. And let's say that we want to change this to bar 1, so we'll go right click and set 1 here. And let's play this and see what happens. Without a drum beat, and because the synth there has a slow attack, it's kind of hard to tell if you're in time. But after the first 16 bars, looks like we might have some slightly thicker data. Oh yeah, piano. Nice. Okay, that's starting to sound better. Okay, and then the rest of it is pretty straightforward. And the rest of it is going to take a little bit of minor adjusting to get it right on the grid. And remember, like I said earlier, you don't necessarily have to work with just the even bar numbers. Okay. So that one was definitely a little bit trickier, but usually the tricky part is the start of the file. So basically, anytime you're working with an EDM track and it doesn't seem to be warping correctly, my recommendation is to go into the track a little bit till you start getting an obvious place where you can figure out a downbeat, where the beginning of a bar hits. Once you've got that downbeat, wherever it happens to be, put a warp marker on it, and move it to the beginning of one of the bars nearby, 25, 26, any round number. And then, from that, once you have that warp marker in the middle of the song in the correct place, get rid of any warp markers before then, and if there's no more warp markers to the left, all of this audio is going to spring to its proper uncompressed and unstretched form, and then you can go back and see if you can find an earlier spot in the song to start things off at. Now, I mentioned that this little thing at the beginning, that's kind of annoying. If I had a choice, what I would do with that one is I would open my audio editor. Actually, I would go into the directory. So which one was it? It was the Just Breathe. So I'm going to copy, paste. I'm going to make a copy of this file. I'll go into my editor. I'll open it. I'll open the copy. Zoom in a little bit. And you can see all this.
Lunare Project. Vi faremo sentire le stelle.
Yeah, see, that's unfortunate. That shouldn't be there. So I would just delete that. I would save it. And then looking in Ableton, if I were to, let's see, there it shows up. I bring that in, and this is the one that's a copy. I guess you can't see that that's the copy. But anyway, in this one, you can see you don't have that stuff to work with. So again, I would set one there. Sorry, I would warp from here straight. Clears out all those unnecessary warp markers. I would find the beginning of the beat. Yeah. I'd move that to the nearest bar. In this case, it went to 24. I'd unclick. Let's zoom in a little. I'd unclick this. The audio to the left of your first good marker is going to spring to its original state. And if you zoom in, well, it looks like there's the beginning. So I'd move that. Oh no, actually it looks like there's the beginning. and I would probably set that to 1-1, and then my whole Okay, so basically that's the process. Pretty straightforward stuff. Obviously these ones were a little bit trickier than the stuff that I used in my original Warping Ableton video, but at least it shows you that it's not hard to deal with minor headaches like that. Just go into the file, partway into it, find a beat that you know is the downbeat of a bar, move it to a bar, to the beginning of a bar, go back, delete any warp markers before that point, so your audio stretches or compresses to where it should be, and then look at an even bar number near the beginning of the song and see if you can line that one up, and then just warp through the whole thing normally as expected. Okay? Hopefully these little tips made those few odd ones that are a little bit tricky easier to warp. And like I say, I will try and do a video about warping acapellas and really tricky stuff at some point soon. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and check out some of my other videos if you get a chance.